Welcome to The Explainer, where we break down big ideas. Today, we're tackling a pretty provocative argument from political commentator Victor Davis Hanson. He talks about something he calls democratic nihilism. So, what exactly is that, and what's the case he makes for it? Let's jump in.
So the argument kicks off with this really strong statement. They descended into utter nihilism. Now, nihilism, we're going to assume that's a typo for nihilism, because that's the word at the heart of this whole thing. But it begs the question, right? What does he even mean by political nihilism, and how does he back up such a strong claim?
Okay, so here's how we're going to break this down. First, we'll get into the main thesis, what nihilism means in this context. Then we'll look at what he says sparked it all, the evidence he uses, some deeper causes he points to, and then finally, we'll wrap up with the conclusion. All right, let's get right into it. Part 1, the thesis. So what are we actually talking about here when we say nihilism? It's super important to get this right. We're not talking about some grand philosophical concept. This is purely about politics. So, according to this argument, political nihilism basically means there's no real, consistent plan for governing. The idea is that political actions are driven more by just opposing the other side, rather than pushing a constructive, thought-out agenda. The source claims this is a huge shift for the Democratic Party, moving away from having a clear blueprint on big issues, like the economy or foreign policy. And to really drive this point home, the argument draws a pretty stark contrast. It looks back at the Democratic Party of the 1990s, during the Clinton years, and compares it to today. The claim is that the old platform looks almost, Republican by today's standards. That's how much of a fundamental transformation, he argues, has taken place. Okay, so, if there was this massive shift, the next logical question is, why? What happened? Well, the argument points to one single, very powerful catalyst: the Trump effect. The argument puts forward this idea that there's just something about Donald Trump that, as the quote says, drives the left into kind of a state of madness. You've probably heard the term Trump derangement syndrome. That's basically what's being described here as the main trigger. The point isn't about normal political disagreement. It's that the reaction to him personally was so intense, it kind of took over everything else, pushing actual policy to the back burner. So why such a strong reaction? Well, the argument digs into a few things. It's not just about his policies. It's his whole persona, his accents, his appearance, and maybe most importantly, his total disdain for the big institutions, the media, academia, the deep state, even corporate America. It's this combination, the argument goes, that created a really unique kind of opposition. Okay, so we've got the catalyst, but an argument needs evidence, right? So what's the proof for this claim? Let's get into the specific examples the source uses to show this supposed pattern of inconsistency. Here's a specific example the source highlights: foreign policy towards Iran. The argument goes like this. Before Trump took military action, the criticism was apparently that he was all talk, that he would always chicken out. But then, the moment he did take action, the criticism supposedly flipped 180 degrees. Suddenly he was a warmonger, starting World War III. This is presented as Exhibit A for political inconsistency. And it doesn't stop there. The argument then lays out this timeline, and it's just this rapid-fire sequence of events, one after another. You have the Russia collusion narrative, the first impeachment, claims of Russian disinformation, a second impeachment, the Mar-a-Lago raid, and then all the trials. The point being made here is that these aren't just separate political fights. Instead, they're presented as a continuous, relentless pattern of opposition, which is the very definition of the nihilism being described. But, the argument suggests this isn't just about Trump. He was the catalyst, sure, but he didn't appear in a vacuum. The source points to 3 much bigger, deeper societal shifts, cosmic shifts, as he calls them, that it claims really set the stage for all of this, changing the entire political landscape. So what are these 3 cosmic changes? They're identified as open borders, globalization, and something called blue state flight. Let's take a look at each one. All right, first up, immigration, or open borders, as the source puts it. The argument points to the number of foreign-born residents, 53 million, which is about 16% of the population. The claim here is that this has created a whole new political constituency, a group that, the argument suggests, is more likely to depend on government subsidies, and so naturally supports the party that provides them. Okay, number 2 is globalization. Here's the logic. Globalization, the argument goes, made a billionaire class on the coasts super rich.
Think finance, media, tech. This new wealth then created a powerful left-leaning donor base. And what do they fund? According to the source, it's boutique issues, niche causes that might not have broad, popular support with the rest of the country. And the third big shift, blue state flight. The idea here is pretty simple. People are supposedly leaving states like California, New York, and Illinois. Why? The argument points to things like high taxes, crime, overregulation, and struggling schools. The takeaway, according to the source, is that if this political model isn't even working at the state level, it's probably not an agenda that's going to resonate with the whole country. Okay, so this is the crucial part. How do all these pieces fit together? You got the catalyst, Trump, and these three huge societal shifts. How do they lead to this idea of nihilism that we started with? The whole argument really boils down to this one strategic question. Imagine you're a political party, and let's say your core agenda, the one shaped by these big changes we just talked about, just doesn't click with most of the country. What's your move? What do you do then? And here's the conclusion the source draws. If your agenda is what they call a 70-30 issue, meaning 70% of the public is against it, you can't really campaign on it. So what's the alternative? Well, the argument is you don't. Instead of trying to win people over, you shift your entire strategy. You go hysterical. You go nihilistic. In other words, you focus on constant, intense opposition. And that, right there, is the punchline of the whole argument. And that really leaves us with the core question at the heart of this whole thing. Is a political strategy built entirely on opposition still a coherent agenda? Or is it actually the absence of one? Where is that line? That's the central idea behind this democratic nihilism argument.